Okay. So, good day everybody. So, kung curious po kayo kung ano ang annulment, ano ang grounds for annulment, at kung magkano ba magpa-annul, papag-usapan po natin yan lahat for today's video. Okay, so first issue po muna tayo, AttorNEIL, what is an annulment? So, ang nangyayari po sa annulment is that a court with competent jurisdiction, specifically a family court, declares that a voidable marriage is invalid and therefore has no legal existence due to a defect in any of the essential requisites of a valid marriage. So, kung sa Tagalog pa po, ibig sabihin po nito, ito ang pagwawalang bisa ng korte sa isang voidable marriage. And a voidable marriage naman po simply means that it is a marriage with a defect in any of its essential requisites. Okay, so follow-up question po tayo. AttorNEIL, ano ba ang essential requisites sa isang marriage or sa isang kasalan? So, unang-una po dyan is the legal capacity of the contracting parties. O kung sa Tagalog pa, ito ang legal na kapasidad ng parties para pumasok sa isang kasalan. So, under our laws po, what is required is that a party must be at least 18 years old and that the marriage must be between a male and a female. And the second essential requisite naman po is that the consent of the contracting parties must be freely given in the presence of the solemnizing officer. So kung sa Tagalog pa, yung consent po means ito yung pagpayag mo na magpakasal dun sa spouse mo. And in the presence of the solemnizing officer naman po means that your consent was given, harap-harapan kayo ng pastor, imam, or basta kung sino man yung solemnizing officer ninyo. So in short po, hindi po pwede sa atin yung virtual na kasalan or yung kasalan by proxy kasi yun nga po, dapat harap-harapan kayo nung pastor mo. Okay, so kung meron pong defect either dun sa dalawa, it means that your marriage is voidable and is therefore annullable. And the reason why it is important to take note of those defects po kasi yung second issue po natin, yung grounds for annulment, dun lang po kasi yun maglalaro sa mga defects dun sa essential requisites. And now moving on to our second issue. So our second issue is AttorNEIL, what are the grounds po ba for annulment? So unang-una po sa lahat, yung pinaka-importanting i-take note natin regarding the grounds for annulment is that the grounds for annulment must be existing at the time of the celebration of the marriage. Anyway, moving on na po tayo to the specific grounds of annulment. So the grounds of annulment po can be found under Article 45 or under Article 46 of the Family Code. So una po muna, tingnan po muna natin yung defect in the legal capacity of the contracting parties. So what is required under our laws is that the parties must be at least 18 years old and that the marriage must be between a man and a woman. Issue po kasi dito, if you are at least 18 years old but under 21 years old, you are required to get the parental consent of your parents. At ang mangyayari po, pag hindi nyo kunin yung parental consent na yon, there will now be a defect in your legal capacity. And now let's move on to the second set of grounds naman po for annulment, and these are related to the consent which results into it not being freely given. So the first one po is that either party is of unsound mind, and the meaning po of unsound mind is that the parties have a mental condition which will not make them able to fully understand or be aware of the circumstances surrounding the marriage na pinapasukan po nila. And next naman po, still under consent not being freely given, is due to circumstances of fraud. So first ground po under fraud is the concealment by final judgment of a conviction of a crime involving moral turpitude. So a crime involving moral turpitude po in summary simply means that due to the vileness, seriousness, or gravity of the offense, ay makikita nyo po talaga na yung moral compass ng accused or ng partner nyo is clearly corrupt due to its seriousness. And next naman po, still under fraud, is the concealment by the wife of a pregnancy other than her husband at the time of their marriage. Okay, so take note po, yung wife ay nabuntis by another man other than husband, and such fact of pregnancy was concealed by the wife dun sa future husband niya. Okay, so question, paano po pag buntis by another man pero pinaalam naman po ng wife dun sa future husband niya? In that situation po, hindi na po yun ground for annulment because there is no longer any concealment of such pregnancy. And now still under fraud naman po is the concealment of a sexually transmitted disease regardless of the nature or severity of the disease. As long as merong STD yung partner nyo at kinonceal niya yun sa inyo at the time of celebration of your marriage, yan po, that is also a ground for annulment of a marriage. And the last set of grounds po still under fraud is the concealment of drug addiction, habitual alcoholism, homosexuality, or lesbianism. Take note po dito, it is the fact of concealment of those circumstances that makes it a ground for annulment, and and not the mere existence of such condition. So example, kung alam mo namang drug addict yung asawa mo, alam mong manginginom, alam mong homosexual or lesbian siya, tapos pinakasalan mo pa rin, in that scenario, hindi na po yun ground for annulment because there is no longer any concealment po. Okay, so yun po yung mga grounds constituting fraud which will result into the consent of the party not being freely given. And another ground for annulment naman po is the use of force, intimidation, or undue influence over the other party in acquiring his or her consent. So example po nitong 3 is number 1 for force po. Example, nandun na kayo sa wedding venue tapos bigla mong siniko yung wife mo or sinuntok mo siya dun sa harap ng pastor. Tapos after mo siya suntukin, biglang nagtanong yung pastor, will you marry, blah blah blah, ganyan-ganyan. So dun po, there is already vitiation of consent by the use of actual force. So intimidation naman po is the act of one of the parties in instilling in the mind of another a grave or imminent danger or evil will happen to him or her if he does not follow your instructions. So example, papunta pa lang po kayo sa wedding venue tapos habang nagda-drive po kayo doon, sabi nyo doon sa partner nyo na pag hindi ka mag-I do mamaya, ipapapatay kita or ipapapatay yung family. So dahil po doon, may na-instill na grave and imminent danger or evil doon sa mind ng partner ninyo na napilitan po siyang mag-I do doon sa inyo sa kasalan. In that situation, there is also a vitiation of consent. And lastly naman po regarding undue influence. So undue influence naman po, yung best example ko lang nito is if one of the parties is very charismatic at sa sobrang charismatic niya maski ano sabihin niya kahit kalokohan na is ginagawa nyo pa rin po, parang nabe-brainwash na kayo. So yan, if there is undue influence, that also amounts to a vitiation of consent. And another ground for annulment naman po is being impotent.
Not corrupt young portion not to of the recording. Anyway, regarding impotency, the issue is the impossibility of sexual intercourse with the opposite sex. Hindi po pagiging sterile or bayog ang issue dito.
And another ground for annulment naman po is the affliction of a sexually transmitted disease that is serious and incurable. So in this STD naman po, take note na there is no longer any requirement of concealment as long as mabigyan po kayo ng STD ng partner niya which is serious and incurable, that is already a ground for annulment. And now let's go to the last ground for annulment. This is the most favorite and the most commonly used in most cases. So that is the existence of psychological incapacity in one of the spouses. Okay, so in summary po, psychological incapacity means that your partner or your spouse is unable to perform his or her marital obligations sa inyo. Okay, so ito po, bigyan ko kayo ng example for better visualization. Example, yung spouse po ninyo is unable to perform sexual intercourse with you pero kaya niya dun sa ibang tao. Will that constitute a psychological incapacity? And the answer to that po is yes, because ang issue po kasi dito is that if he is unable to perform his marital obligations in relation to you, kahit na kaya niya pa i-perform yun sa ibang tao. So as long as po na ma-establish ninyo is that the condition of psychological incapacity dun sa spouse nyo already exists prior to your marriage and that it is serious and that it is incurable when it comes to you as his or her partner, then that is sufficient to establish psychological incapacity. Even if the symptoms only showed after the fact of your marriage na po. So last na pong i-discuss ko under the grounds for annulment is that please take note po that the fact of separation ninyo ng spouse by agreement or your spouse being physically abusive, those are not grounds for annulment po because yung mga ganong circumstances po kasi they are after the celebration of the marriage already. Therefore, it does not affect any of the essential requisites. So consequently, since there is no defect in any of the essential requisites, then the marriage is not voidable kahit na nag-separate po kayo or kahit na physically abused po kayo. Okay, so now let's go to our third issue po. So our third issue is, AttorNEIL, magkano po ba magpa-annul? Mahal daw po kasi magpa-annul. Yun yung laging tinatanong sa akin eh. So when it comes to pricing of annulment cases or attorney's fees in relation to annulment, I must admit na medyo may kamahalan po yung attorney's fees talaga sa annulment. And that is because number one, the petition for annulment po kasi is filed in the regional trial court level, specifically in one that is designated as a family court. So yung attorney's fees po kasi nakabase din yan kung anong level ng court ipa-file nyo. Pag MTC, mas mura. Pag RTC, mas mahal. So yun nga po, annulment is filed in the RTC, specifically a family court, kaya medyo may kamahalan po. And on top of this po, in annulment cases, kailangan po ng at least 3 to 4 witnesses. In addition pa, kailangan din ng expert witness via a psychiatrist or a psychologist. So babayad din po kayo ng professional fee nun nila. So that is another extra expense. So dahil po doon, medyo madami pong hearings, babayad kayo ng appearance fee ng abogado. Kaya medyo may kamahalan po talaga yung annulment cases. Question po kung how much specifically yung attorney's fees for annulment cases. Generally po, annulment cases starts at around 250,000 pesos as attorney's fees. Without appearance fee pa po yun and without about the professional fee of the psychiatrist or psychologist. So all in all po, I think it is safe to assume na makagastos po talaga kayo ng at least 300,000 plus in annulment cases. However, please take note naman po na in a recent decision by the Supreme Court, which is the case of Tan Andal versus Andal, a 2021 case, sinabi naman po ng Supreme Court na doon na hindi naman daw kailangan ng expert witness to establish psychological incapacity because psychological incapacity is not a medical condition but rather a legal issue that needs to be established by the court. So ang consequence po nun, kung gusto nyo makatipid, pwede po ninyo i-mention yan sa abogado ninyo na ayaw nyo na mag-expert testimony. I-emphasize lang ninyo na gamitin nyo yung Tan Andal versus Andal case. And lastly, para naman po doon sa mga qualified individuals, the Public Attorney's Office or PAO po accepts annulment cases already. So punta lang po kayo sa social media pages ni Atty. Acosta, the chief of the PAO or the Public Attorney's Office. Meron na po siyang videos doon na sinasabi niya verbally na pwede magtanggap ang PAO ng annulment cases. Okay, so para po sa may mga legal concerns or naghahanap ng abogado para sa annulment case or for other case in general, AttorNEIL po is accepting cases. Huwag po kayong mahiya lumapit. Just message my Facebook page or send me an email for an appointment. I am open po for office or online consultations. Okay, so hanggang dyan lang po muna tayo today. God bless po. Ingat po kayo palagi and until next time. Bye-bye po.